Hello and welcome. You're watching a special show, the Global Strategic Dialogue on India and Pakistan. Over the last several hours, we've been hearing voices from India, we've been hearing voices from Pakistan. But what's the world view on the current situation in the subcontinent? Over the next 1 hour, you will hear from leading strategic affairs experts, analysts who keep an eye on South Asia, renowned think tankers joining us from Washington DC, from London, joining us from Beijing, from the United Kingdom, from Israel, from Tehran, from Islamabad and New Delhi as well. And we will try and understand what the global view on the current situation in the subcontinent is. Before that, let me show you how France, the United States and the United Kingdom have come forth and said that at the Financial Action Task Force, they will try and put pressure on Pakistan, and also at the United Nations move once again to have Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Maulana Masood Azhar designated as a global terrorist. Take a look.
As Pakistan refuses to admit its role in Pulwama suicide bomb attack, India is now planning to mount a fresh dossier offensive at the international arena to expose Pakistan in front of the world. According to top sources, Home Ministry is preparing a new dossier containing Pakistan's active role in Pulwama attack and its hand in fanning terror in India and several other countries. The dossier will be shared with all Indian embassies to expose Pakistan's lies that it has nothing to do with Pulwama strike. Home Minister Rajnath Singh on Wednesday held meetings with India's envoys to Pakistan and United States. Meanwhile, in a big boost for India's anti-terror offensive, France has moved the United Nations seeking a ban on Jaish-e-Mohammed.
It's been 2 years that we are trying to put Masood Azhar on the UN sanction list. So, of course, we are working a lot on this in New York. We are in full solidarity with India.
Members of Congress.
The United States and Britain too have reiterated their support to India on terror and denounced Pulwama terrorist attack.
I've seen it, I've watched, I've gotten a lot of reports on it. We'll have a comment at the appropriate time. It would be wonderful if they got along. It seems like that was a horrible situation, but we're getting reports. We'll have a statement to put out.
We are always we'll always condemn terrorist attacks. We have been dealing with that in a special UN committee for some time before this attack, and we will continue, particularly with our American and our French colleagues, doing what we have done for some time, which is trying to make sure, what I said, which is those who commit the terrorist attacks are held accountable and held responsible for what they have done.
But will China, which has been stalling branding Jaish chief Masood Azhar as a global terrorist, put a spanner again?
India is planning a global offensive to name and shame Pakistan, which faces blacklisting by the global anti-terror watchdog. With the help of France, UK and US, will India be able to isolate its hostile neighbor, or once again will China prove to be its all-weather ally? With Jitendra Bahadur Singh and video journalist Ajay, this is Mosmi Singh in Delhi for India Today.
So joining us on this global strategic dialogue for a voice from Washington DC, we've got Professor Sumit Ganguly. He's the Professor of Political Science at the Indiana University in Bloomington. Welcome, sir. With us on this broadcast from Beijing is N.R. Tenjin, Political Affairs Commentator, Director of the DGI Design in China. Tawheed Asidi is joining us from Iran, is a renowned Iranian affairs analyst. Shehzeb Jilani joins us from Pakistan. Parvez Alam joins us from London. We've got K.C. Singh, former Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, joining us from New Delhi. So welcome to all our guests. I want to go across to Professor Sumit Ganguly first. We've seen the National Security Advisor of the United States say in a tweet that America will support India's right to self-defense, but for the most part, Washington has been silent in comparison with what we saw Bill Clinton, George Bush do in previous conflicts between India and Pakistan. How do you, Professor Sumit Ganguly, think Washington will react in the current situation given the kind of build-up that's taking place between India and Pakistan?
Part of the problem with Washington's reaction is that President Trump is preoccupied at the moment with a number of domestic issues, particularly this highly contentious matter of building a wall along the southern border of the United States with Mexico. That is taking out the bulk of the oxygen of this administration, and consequently, adequate attention simply has not been focused on the developments in South Asia. That said, Bolton's statement is important because previous administrations have shied away from explicitly stating that India has the right of retaliation. Instead, they have provided sort of anodyne responses which have stated that both sides should exercise restraint at this very fraught time and the like. So this does mark an important departure, and it is perfectly in accord with Bolton's rather hawkish views on the world.
Do you think the United States will back India after a military escalation when the Indian army strikes inside Pakistan, and the Prime Minister has made very clear that it will? It's not a question of if, it's a question only of when. Will the United States be expected to side with New Delhi, sir?
Yes, much depends on the nature of the strike. If they are carefully calibrated and they are directed at particular terrorist holdouts or launch pads, I doubt that the United States would fail to endorse the Indian position. On the other hand, if India were to engage in mass mobilization, I think then there would be a bit of hesitation in Washington for fear that this could lead to dramatic escalation along the border.
Okay, let's get a word in now from Beijing. We've got Inar Tenjen. The last time when Maulana Masood Azhar was to be banned at the United Nations, it's Beijing that on very flimsy grounds rejected that global move. Now we're seeing countries come out, countries like France, the United Kingdom and United States say they want to proscribe Maulana Masood Azhar once again. Will China once again side with Terroristan, or will China this time see reason and side with India?
Well, the issue is a little bit more complex for China in terms of Pakistan has always been considered an old friend. And that is the difficulty here. The initial reaction from the Chinese side has been very lukewarm. They have condemned the terrorist activity, but they have not gone so far as to indicate that they will withdraw their technical objections to the naming of Masood as a terrorist. The organization itself has already been designated as such. But the real question is, with what the Chinese see as a hopeful meeting between Xi and Modi in the next month or so coming up, with the desire for the Belt and Road Initiative, whether or not they will change their attitude. After all, this was an act that has been responsibility has been claimed by the terrorist organization that Masood is the head of. It is very hard to ignore that. So at this point, China is in a difficult position. They're at some point going to have to change to make a decision as to which way they're going to go.
Singh, you know, we've seen a very ambiguous kind of response from China. We've seen the position they took in the past backing Pakistan. And when we were speaking to General Pervez Musharraf, he says if you got United States on your side, don't forget where China sits. Do you believe China is the one big problem when it comes to India carrying out some kind of a military operation in Pakistan and teaching Pakistan a lesson, Ambassador Singh?
I don't think you can put it in those terms. Chinese would also watch. What will Chinese do if you carry out an operation? They're not going to mobilize on the line of actual control. That would be taking sides very drastically. If things escalate, the question to be asked is, at what point will the Chinese decide that they have to militarily side with Pakistan, which means start distracting the Indian military? But with the initial things, they are neither going to endorse my guess is the French and the British move, in listing Masood Azhar, because if the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia in Delhi today is saying I need to see the proof, then you can imagine the Chinese are going to be even less sympathetic. I don't expect them to do that. So in the initial phase, they will wait and watch. And that's where I think we need to test them out, and the French and the British resolution will test the Chinese out. But we must exert bilateral pressure and tell them to really change their stand, though I doubt they will do it at this stage.
And that then is a problem that India will need to deal with, Sumit Ganguly, where no matter how much pressure we bear on Pakistan internationally, no matter how isolated Pakistan is, given the nature of the United Nations Security Council, given the potential of Beijing using its veto, diplomatically, not much may emerge from this global move.
I'm afraid not, because China has this hold which it can exert at any time it pleases, being a member of the UN Security Council. And the only hope that lies is that the Trump administration might bring significant pressure to bear on China. But I don't think that is likely, because given the many other preoccupations that President Trump has and his inattention to details about foreign policy issues, I doubt that one can expect him and his administration to organize themselves to bring this kind of pressure to bear on China. Nevertheless, I think India should make it amply clear to the United States that this is precisely the kind of pressure that it expects from the US to exert on China if the US is genuinely interested in pursuing a strategic partnership with India. A strategic partnership is meaningless if one cannot come through at a time of need.
Okay, I want to go across to Parvez Alam to get a sense of the view in London, because the UK has its own problems with Brexit, huge challenges internally. How much attention is the India-Pakistan situation drawing? How strongly will the United Kingdom support New Delhi in its move to isolate Pakistan globally, sir?
Let's understand two things basically, that the rest of the world community, UK, Europe, America, they believe sincerely that India is a huge ally because of India's resources, access, economic strength. So that's one part. Second part is that during the last 6 months or so, and particularly during the last 10-15 years as well, but I'm just emphasizing that during the last 3 months particularly, Pakistan has again become hugely important for the international community because of this situation in Afghanistan. Let's not forget that on the 25th of February, all parties, particularly Taliban, they are meeting in Qatar. America is organizing the dialogue. That's crucial. That is America's longest war. So honestly, at this moment, for the rest of the world, I'm talking about the international community, the emphasis is on having a good rapport with Pakistan and Afghanistan. So at this stage, I understand that UK or some of these European countries and other allies are not going to say something which somehow impinges upon the dialogue which is going to take place in Qatar. That's very important.
Singh, now that's another complication from India's perspective. The fact that America is pulling troops out of Afghanistan, and therefore Pakistan at this moment once again is important just because of its geography, even if it continues to harbor terrorists, even if the United States knows that, but they have their own military complications with Afghanistan.
That's why the very defined tone adopted by Prime Minister Imran Khan and the confidence he's exuding, because they realize that strategically Saudi Crown Prince had been there, their coffers are full, the immediate financial problems are taken care of. And then don't forget that even before the blast in Pulwama, there's a blast in Sistan province of Iran. And with that blast, where IRGC lost 27 soldiers, Pakistan is aligned completely with the group of Saudi Arabia, Emirates, US and Israel. And they're completely in that corner. So therefore, this strategic alliance that they have, you see, with India, these countries may have an economic alliance or economic interest. But with Pakistan, there's an old strategic alliance dating back to 1979 when the Soviets came into Afghanistan. And that kicks in. And for China, it is even a more important thing because this is their main because of their Belt and Road Initiative, because of the connectivity, CPEC. This is their main surrogate in South Asia to tie down India and also to have access to the entire region.
Shehzad Jilani in Karachi, it seems as if you've got India, United States, the United Kingdom on one side, and you've got Saudi Arabia and China as the only two countries that seem to be siding with Pakistan. As far as the global context is concerned, Islamabad seems quite isolated except for support from Saudi Arabia and from Beijing.
Rahul, I could hear Parvez Alam, but I couldn't hear K.C. Singh Saab. I think Parvez Alam was making a crucial point. If you look at the region right now, given the desperation of the Trump administration to get out of Afghanistan, it needs Pakistan on its side. And that is why the clip we heard earlier of President Trump, sort of a lukewarm response, non-committal, we are looking at it, we'll have a detailed statement later on. So I don't think that you can take for granted that the United States will fully back India in case of a strike. I think the sense we have in Pakistan is that everybody is urging caution. The Saudi Crown Prince, who was in Pakistan, currently in India, has said that we would like to encourage de-escalation. China, we heard your guest from China saying that, look, nothing has really changed between Pakistan and China. China opposed Jaish-e-Mohammed's chief Masood Azhar's inclusion on the Security Council list before. Will probably do it again. So there hasn't been much change globally. So if India is hoping to put diplomatic pressure on Pakistan, I think the ground situation does not seem to suggest it will happen. And I think we need to bear that in mind. So I don't think that you can count the US completely supporting India because of its interest in Afghanistan.
There is now a lot of talk about the Wuhan spirit, the newfound relationship between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping, the Chinese president. Will that in any way influence how Beijing reacts? Or do you believe that it will continue to back Pakistan over India? Because now we're seeing some kind of a thaw post Doklam. There hasn't been another military conflict of the kind that we saw in Doklam. And by and large, better sense has prevailed.
Who are you addressing?
I'm asking Inarten Jain, political affairs commentator from Beijing. Sir.
From that point of view, I think Xi Jinping is very anxious to get India on its side for the Belt and Road Initiative. And quite frankly, if India was a little bit more forthcoming and less concerned about playing all sides, I mean, Modi has met with the Russians, the U.S., China. He seems to be balancing India's interests, but unfortunately, that lacks sincerity because you don't know exactly where he stands. And this is from China's perspective. If you wanted to solve the situation, India wanted to solve the situation with Pakistan, I would suggest that they get closer to Xi because, frankly, if India was to open its borders, not directly, but let us say through Nepal, through the railroad connection that is being opened by China through there, and it's a settled border, so there'd be no issue about territory. But if they were to allow a railhead from the Nepal border to go through India, faster rail, this would allow goods and services and people to go through India. And that would, in essence, negate the importance of the Pakistan and the corridor that's being created. So the solution is in front of everyone's faces. The question is, does India have the resolve to do it?
So India today spoke this afternoon to the French ambassador in India. We also spoke to the British High Commissioner. Let me show you a quick excerpt of what they had to say representing the views of P5 countries, France and the United Kingdom.
We are acting in New York today together with our partner, so that Masoud Azhar can be listed under the Committee 1267 sanction list. We've been active over the past 2 years on this. We've been trying hard in close coordination with India on this. And obviously, after the horrible attacks that happened last week, I think we had to take action in New York, and we had to move very quickly so that Masoud Azhar can be listed as the terror group he's heading is already listed in the UN.
Considering you mentioned that there are a lot of complexities when you're talking about security, especially the past week we have seen what happened in the northern part of India, in Pulwama, where we lost a lot of soldiers over there. This was a Fedayeen attack. Many countries, including your country, condemned this. What more can you actually, how can you actually help India deal with this particular issue, especially when it comes to terrorism?
Well, we and India, I repeat the condolences I've expressed before about what happened in Kashmir. We are always condemning, will always condemn terrorist attacks. And what we want to do, and we've always wanted to do, is make sure that those who committed them are held responsible and accountable for what they've done. That's what we have done for many, many years in the Security Council, specifically in the case of Jaish Mohammed and the leader, Masoud Azhar. We have been dealing with that in a special UN committee for some time before this attack. And we will continue, particularly with our American and our French colleagues, doing what we have done for some time, which is trying to make sure, what I said, which is those who commit the terrorist attacks are held accountable and held responsible for what they have done.
So France and the United Kingdom very clearly siding with India in this battle to isolate Pakistan globally. While Awad now joins us, he understands the Arabic world. And now I want to ask you, Mr. Awad, about the Saudi prince's visit to India and your takeaways from the Saudi prince's visit. He said this morning in the courtyard of the Rashtrapati Bhavan that Modi is like my elder brother, I am his younger brother. You know, there was a certain brotherhood that they were talking about. But yet, in the end, when they put out a joint statement, there is no mention of cross-border terrorism, about Pakistan having to behave itself, tackle terror. There's none of that. There's a general condemnation of terrorism. What do you make of the Saudi Crown Prince's visit to India, sir?
Well, I think you rightly said it, because when we were in the press conference, we didn't hear any word from him about condemning the heinous attack in Pulwama. So I was expecting that he could say something on that, or he could at least mention. Generally, he spoke of coordinating in intelligence with India and the rest of the world. But we were expecting also that the joint statement should give something. I believe the Saudis are playing a very strong role in supporting and financing most of these terrorist organizations all over. We know that from the culture of the Saudis, jihadists during Afghan time, till now they have influence over these groups. So therefore they may be using their office to pressurize Pakistan not to allow this group attack on India, because they have other agenda for them currently. But I would expect that the visit as a whole, for me, it was not fully prepared for, because even the agreement signed today, it was not those agreements we could expect from a head of state to visit India. But nevertheless, he talked of $100 billion investment in India. He talked about the petrochemical project, the solar energy and all. These are signs that they could be in the future, because usually it's a one-man show in Saudi Arabia. If the man is determined to do so, he can do lots of things actually.
Okay, so I'll take a quick break. We continue with the global strategic dialogue on India and Pakistan. When we come back on the other side, we're hearing voices from Washington DC, from Beijing, from London. We're hearing also from Tehran. We're hearing from India and Pakistan, and our special show continues on the other side of a quick break. Stay tuned. We're back in 3 minutes.
Thanks for watching the video. For more such news and updates, please like, share and subscribe to India Today. Also check out our other great videos from our channel. We know you would love to.